Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Straight Out of BPS podcast with Rudy and Jamari. I am Rudy Looters, and on this journey with me is the one and only
Jamari Jones, everybody. Thank you everyone for coming. It's great to be back. Thank you for the continued support as always. Please don't forget to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, um, all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, everything. We on everything. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us and follow us, subscribe, share our podcast or YouTube with someone. And thank you guys.
Thank you, thank you. How you doing today, brother?
I'm actually doing all right. Uh, it's been this week was rough. I don't know, it just seemed like a little bit longer than usual. There was a lot of testing happening at our school, and getting kids in. It was good to see a lot of our students coming in for like testing,
Mhm.
but it was just good to see their faces. And so it was decent, man. It was decent, long, but very had little good spots in the middle. What about you?
Um, I think it's 50-50. I think I'm okay. It was definitely feel long and a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Definitely felt overwhelmed at times.
Yeah.
But also, I had a situation that have this is usually the time of the year where the part of my job that I don't like.
Mm.
Um, I had a meeting with student, decision day was around. Even after May 1st, we still had some student making trying to figure out which path or which decision they're gonna make.
Yeah.
And, from asking school for extension to
Yeah.
the complete package. It was a lot. But it's always the time when the kids are excited, they got into the school they want, and then you have to tell them, unfortunately,
Mm.
school does not give you enough money to go there.
Yeah.
And I have to message it in a way like because oh, here's Rudy crushing their dream, um I'm forced, so I have to you understand, I want to make sure you are making the most financial fit decision. While I'm not making decision for you,
Mm-hmm.
it's my job to make sure you have all the information in front of you. And those are the information. I had a student, and let's talk about some school make it difficult to understand the financial package or to comprehend it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the student touch, he had a $6,000 gap for the
You
year.
better talk about it. Talk about that.
And I'm like, no, you actually don't have a 6,000. You have a $12,000 gap
Yeah.
for the year. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, um,
It's
and
the way they word it. Like,
you know
so
how they word it? This is the one of the worst way they word it. They put it, oh, $12,000 available like for you, and then as a parent plus loan. But
yeah.
parent plus loan is not a guaranteed loan. First, it requires your parent to have great credit score
Yeah.
to have that amount. Yes, if they don't have a great credit score, they're gonna get declined, and you will get some money, but it's not a reason for you. And the interest rate is higher than the other.
Yeah. Other loans. Yeah.
Like the audacity, and yes, I said the audacity of suggesting that on a financial package baffled me,
Mhm.
and it confused people.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about those when they get a scholarship. They be like, "You're getting 100 and something $1,000 for over the next 4 years," and
yeah,
it confuses the students. Like, "Oh, I'm getting 100 per year." Nah,
no,
that's cut up into
4 years.
4 years.
Well,
Yeah.
like or like So let's say the school is $60,000 per year, and
Yeah.
they give you $60,000 for 4 years,
Uh-huh.
$15,000 per year. So how you gonna? What are you gonna do to get the $35,000 left? How you gonna?
Right.
So it confuses people, and it
Yeah.
just like, and then they get those letters. They're excited. I'm gonna go there. They tell everyone this is where I'm going, and then here comes you
Mm-hmm.
looking out for the best interest.
Yeah.
Like, oh, actually, unless you have that much money,
Yeah.
you can't go there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's every year I go through that every year, and it's just
Yeah.
like, damn, like, yeah. But while I'm happy, like they're making financial fit decision,
Mhm.
I just hate being in that position because if they were doing a better job informing them um of the gap of the amount and how to present it without any
Yeah.
confusion, like we wouldn't be we need to go through all that. So yeah, it's 50-50, but we're here, I
Yep.
just push in, and hopefully we know those decisions are affecting not just the next 4 years of their life, you know,
Yeah.
the rest of their life. And we definitely want to make sure they come out on the other side with as little to less loan as possible. So
Absolutely. I know that's a really tough job. Like, I've been there. You already know, and
yeah,
it's hard for when you say we're trying to look out for the best interests of the student, but they have a vision of what their college experience, what
yeah,
they want to have, and what they want. But sometimes that doesn't necessarily align with what the cards they are dealt. I always used to say that the easy part is kind of getting in, is whether you can afford to go is a challenge. Um, and I know it's a difficult position to be in. But you know, sometimes those conversations are better to be had, and they get mad at you right then and there than them being in debt or making a wrong fit, having a wrong fit or matching with the wrong school.
yeah.
Um, so that's that's just challenging. Um, yeah, so let's get into our views on the latest news, man.
What we got today?
We got some exciting stuff. It looks like we have all students who chose hybrid or had the initial or filled out the initial survey to change their learning model for BPS to in person will be coming back May 17th.
Mm.
Um, and that is interesting per se. And let's just read through the rest of them and then we go back and discuss. So the second one is BPS is exploring a full-time virtual school option for the 2021-2022 school year. And they sent out a family survey to get feedback. And the third thing that came up is BPS is expecting 400 million via the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Um, so, and with that, right, there will be a committee that represents the different audiences of BPS, led by our superintendent, and there will be 5 meetings that is going to decide what we do with this money. And the phrase that they have been using really is return, recover, and reimagine, which I really like those words, right? It kind of captures everything that we want to see happen, but is that really gonna happen? But let's start from the choose the hybrid. May 17th, students are returning. So we already know that the middle school students are already back and flowing.
They're
Uh,
back in person full time.
yeah, they're back in person full time. Um, since we came back from break.
Okay.
Um, and what's interesting to me is that they only gave high schoolers like literally like a month to be back in person.
Mm.
Fourth term has already started. I don't know if this really makes sense for them to come back, but I'm thinking about it now and I'm just like, maybe they're doing this because of MCAS.
Oh,
So students are not required to take MCAS, right? This year, but students that are in person are going to take MCAS because they're there already. So
so you saying that the student who are here gonna take the MCAS. So when
yeah.
what about the student who not are not in person?
So they are not required. It's not a requirement for them to take MCAS
How
if
is
they're
it
not in
gonna
person,
impact them
huh?
going forward that they did not take the MCAS?
So students have they were taking they have multiple times to take MCAS
Mhm.
throughout their 4 years. So even if a student fails the MCAS, they have a chance to retake it and pass it throughout the 4 years they're in high school. There are some cases where um, students, even senior year, are still trying to take the MCAS because it's such a challenging test for some of them.
I wonder why.
Um, some cases students may have IEPs
Mm.
that like it's hard for them to comprehend some of the aspects of the test, or the skills are really low, but they have been building them over the course of the years, but still not up to par on like passing the test. And I just don't think it's a good measure of certain student skills, like especially for students that might have an IEP or have a learning disability. Like that's not necessarily the right way to test if they know something. Is through like an MCAS exam. If there, I wish there was something else that BPS or like that the state could do to test individuals like that.
But
Um,
you say that uh,
mhm.
in prior episodes, like um, we're not truly using the test uh to like once the kids take the test, like and we find out okay they didn't do good. What's next? How do we use the test score to support them and give them the help and the resource that they need,
Yeah,
rather than more like using it to test their intelligence, which is not the case.
right.
I'm not a test taker. I was taking AP classes, and I, I, I did it, like every time the problem or the class, I was solving them. Like I was proud of solving them. But whenever the test came in, like I had anxiety, like the pressure, the timing, like all that factor into that. So um yeah, so like what are we doing to support those students and not just like, because to be honest, like when you're taking a test, you just it's it's more about memorizing than comprehending.
Yeah,
Like you memorize a lesson to take a test, then you forget about that
yeah.
lesson.
Literally do a brain dump.
Random,
Yeah.
like, as opposed to like I start to comprehend, understand
Hmm.
like, what we're doing, and it yeah. I think we need to revisit that. Obviously they found a way to get the MCAS in. This is Massachusetts for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so BPS exploring a full-time virtual school option next year. I personally have conflicted feelings.
Okay.
Um, Part of me is like, cool, it's like an alternative learning model for some kids to basically learn online. There's a lot of students that have been thriving in the online option that when they're in person don't necessarily thrive in person. And I think it's a lot of stuff like social anxiety or not feeling like they belong in certain environments, but they can really kind of shine through their skills in on in online. But I'm like I'm interested to see what they do with this. I still want to know what parents have said as far as the survey data they kind of sent out and what the parents responded as for what they would want for their child moving forward. Um,
I think that they need to identify who's successful online and who's not, and
mhm,
who was successful online, because it's at the end of the day it's about like which environment that's best suited for you. Some kids perform well online, some don't.
yeah.
There's it's not like I always say, like we need to create a system not for the whole but for the individual,
Mhm,
understand the need of each individual student, and create resource to address that.
yeah. I think one thing if they're gonna move forward with this, there needs to be guidelines
Of
and
course.
standards as far as when students are online, they need to have like their camera on. There needs to be like, accountability, and not just blank screens and like someone walks away from the computer and you don't know if they're there and you're calling their name. There needs to be some type of accountability there. I think that's where we fell short this year is that, you know, I get that students have, some students don't have the best situation at home,
Hmm.
um, and that prevents them from turning their camera on, or there's a social anxiety. But I feel like in order for students to learn effectively, they learn from each other by interacting,
Yeah.
and everything like that, and I feel like we
But
lost that this year.
well, let me tell you, of course, 100%. But
Yeah.
you also gotta understand, why would a student would rather be stay at home
Mm,
instead of coming in the building knowing that they're not gonna perform well at home, but they would rather stay at home.
hmm.
You have to say, what does that say about your school environment that doesn't feel make the student feel welcome to be in the
Yeah,
building? Like they would rather stay at home and fail than be in your building.
that's a good point. That's a
Like,
good point.
yeah.
That's definitely a good point.
I'm a true believer, regardless of the student, if you create a welcoming environment for them to be there, an
Mm,
environment where everyone is caring, everyone understand, not drive by discipline, they will show up.
hmm.
An environment where their culture is centered and not used on certain days.
Yeah.
Show up.
I feel that.
Yeah,
You better preach.
go for it.
um, so BPS is expecting 400 million via the relief fund. That's a lot of money.
A lot of zeros.
I I just I'm very interested to hear how this committee is, um like how it's gonna go.
Can
How
I
the
say something?
Yeah.
You said, like you said they're gonna create a community that represent the audience in BPS. Here's my
Yeah.
problem with the community that represent the audience in BPS.
Yep.
They're gonna go to the people from the exam school,
Yeah.
and that's I'm sorry, that's not a true representation. Like
Hmm.
uh
And I'm looking at the list of people, and it's available to the public. Um, and you know,
yeah, I think we need to get the word out, get people, we need to get involved, guys. It's
yeah,
enough like that, like
there are five meetings, And if you can go to at least two, like
Yeah.
try to get to all of them. The Zoom links will be available. We will set out a post just to remind people. But this is a lot of money
Yeah.
that we should have input on where it's going.
Definitely.
Uh, and I just want to. I really want to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
And or like listen to what people like how they are making decisions, because to be honest, I don't know how decisions are made.
Oh,
Because I've never been to a meeting like that. So this is my chance. I hope other people follow suit.
same.
And that's one of our goals for this year is being more involved in things like this.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to get involved. We need to know, and we need to like make sure our voice are heard. Like,
Yeah.
no more of this cycle of complaining. Like, no, we need to get involved. Like,
Yeah.
come together and get involved.
Yeah.
And talking about getting involved,
Let's go.
on this episode of Straight Out of BPS podcast, we have a second official on.
Mm-hmm.
She's a BPS alumni. She is the chair of the education committee on the city council. She's a mom of 4 boys, and they are in BPS.
Mm-hmm.
Um, without further ado, our next guest on this podcast is drumroll, city councilor at large and mayoral candidate Annissa Essaibi George.
Let's go.
City Council at Large, Annissa Essaibi George, thank you for joining us on this episode of Straight Out of BPS podcast with Rudy and Jamari. And congratulations on your decision to run for mayor of Boston.
Woo.
Thanks. I love it.
All right. So you are the chair of the education committee as a city councilor at large. You've taught in BPS, your kids are in BPS. What part of your experience, more precisely your teaching experience, or your parenting experience, that has led you to become a fierce advocate for access to a great education for all?
Well, I love that introduction. I am a former classroom teacher. I taught for 13 years at East Boston High School. I'm also a BPS parent, and I'm also a BPS grad. Did you get that in there?
BPS grad, I did not know that.
I am. We're straight out of BPS. We're straight out of BPS.
Straight out of BPS. All right.
I am a very proud graduate of Boston Technical High School, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now the John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science. But I'm a very proud tech tiger, and excited to be here with all of you. But for me, I think that my time in the classroom is so valuable, especially when we think about the work of the city, especially in my capacity as the chair of the Committee on Education, but also in my capacity as vice chair of Ways and Means and vice chair of Public Health. We think about what's happening in our schools. When I think about the interactions I've had during those years in the classroom with all of my former students, all of that informs not just my work around education, it informs all of the pieces that I do with the city, because our kids are living those experiences. And I feel that as a teacher, I had very much a front row seat to their lives and to both their joys and celebrations, but also their challenges and difficulties over the years. And I can lead, and I lead based on my experiences and who I am and what my sort of life story is, but it's very much also informed, I think, mostly by my students that I worked with for all those years. And while I was teaching, I was also coaching. I have one of my former team pictures behind me. And I loved working with our kids, with our city's kids, and loved the time I was a part of their lives. And I actually, through the course of my time on the city council and now over the course of this campaign have had some really cool opportunities to reconnect with some of my former students. I try to stay as connected as I can to my own high school classmates. We're about at a 30-year high school reunion, which is like amazing to me, but here we are.
I think it's important that when you say that, bring your experience, because sometimes we tend to use data to resolve some challenges, but the data they don't have context, and it's important that we share those experience because they share more information that the data will allow us.
Yeah, no, and it helps tell the story about the data. Data is important. Information,
Yeah.
real information is important, but it does help tell us the story.
Yeah.
And, if we just use raw data, we'll never make decisions that include also any empathy or compassion or faith an individual's humanity. Because oftentimes when we're talking about data, we're not talking about good things. We're measuring bad things.
Yeah.
Who spends time measuring good things, which we should. There are things to celebrate.
Yeah. Diving into our next question, within your education plan, you name the importance of having quality early childcare programs. What has kept Boston from having those quality early childhood care programs, and how does your plan address those challenges?
Right. Well, I think the easiest or the sort of simplest response to that question is what has kept us from doing it is money. It does cost a lot of money to create high quality childcare experiences for our youngest Bostonians, for our kids, but we see how important it is, and really over time, it's actually a money saver if we think about investing in our youngest people at their earliest years. And we recognize too, over time, science has evolved. The information that we know has changed, and we realize just as a society how important those early years really are. And granted, most of it happens around play, but through play, children are learning. Through social interactions, children are learning. And we also know how important high quality how important childcare is to our economy, for women in particular, who are often the head of households, how important it is for them to be in our to grab hold of their economic opportunity to re-enter the workforce. High quality childcare is necessary for that to happen. We think about the cost of living, we think about needs of families, but also that if women, in particular women, want to be in the workplace, they're only able to do it if they've got a high quality opportunity for their children. It has to be high quality. But there's some really interesting dynamics and conversations that happen around early ed, besides the academic foundation that helps lead. Childcare itself is an economic opportunity for providers. So in Boston, we have lots of home care settings, often also businesses that are run and owned and operated by women and women of color in particular. And we also see, though, that within that industry, childcare providers, who really are early education providers, are well underpaid in comparison to educators and sort of the K through 12 spectrum.
Right.
We've got a lot of work to do. It's expensive, but I believe it is worth our investment. And there are some federal and state dollars and city dollars that should be used to invest in our children, because nobody ever says no to investing in our children. And that's really important for us to do. And then when we think about, if we extend that to the K to 3, I'm a former high school teacher. I spent a great deal of my professional life in the classroom in education, but at the high school level, we know that what we're doing in those earliest years of school, we can tell you in the 4th grade, and we've known the 4th grade is such an important pivoting point for any one of our kids. Where they are in the 4th grade determines almost everything else that they're going to be able to do with their life. And that's so important that we're getting those early years right.
I think one thing that you said that was so important is that trying to be preventative earlier on instead of being reactive. And if we can think like that for a lot of things, we'll be in such a better place. But definitely, we had a previous episode where we talked about like how so certain schools are, you have these special classrooms where, you know, they get extra work and all this other stuff, and that determines their course over the next like few years. And I just think that we have a lot of work to do, but doing that preventative work is definitely important.
No, I mean, it's obviously best for the child when we think
Yeah.
about our young people and we think about their futures, when we get in early,
Mhm.
it helps us in the long run.
Yeah.
And it's the same, I think a better analogy is around healthcare. We talk about primary healthcare. We talk about, you know, we take our children for well baby visits. We do all of that early before they get sick. We get a flu shot, so we hopefully prevent the flu. We make sure that we're growing. We brush our teeth.
Right.
We take care of ourselves because we want to be well for the long term.
Yeah.
And that's the same in education. The stronger the foundation in the beginning,
Mhm.
the better and the more successful the young person will be over the time of their education. And it's also about creating opportunities. So I'm a teacher, I'm a parent. I want my kids to learn. I want them to have robust, rigorous academic experiences, but I also want them to love learning. And that's at those young ages, that's what we're teaching. We're teaching kids to love learning and love that experience and have a true, you know, joy for it. And you know, that's really important to me as an educator. I want first and foremost, and this is, we've been talking a lot, especially I think because of COVID and isolation and the challenges it's brought so many of our young people, but we talk about Maslow a lot, this theorist, and how if you don't feel safe, if you don't have nourishment, both literal and figurative food, if you don't have nourishment, if you don't have love, if you don't feel safe, then you're not going to be able to learn. And that's what we need to be creating, especially at those earliest years. And for me, as a teacher and as a parent, I always say we start the year off strong and we finish the year off strong. Like those are the two like bookends for success. Because if you start the school year in a strong way, academically, socially, in all of those ways, then, you know, if you have a few bumpy roads in the middle, which especially this last school year, my kids have bumpy roads, but then we worked, let's have a strong finish to the year, because that's going to help us start in September strong. And that's, you know, that's with life too. If we can help our young people start school off in a positive, uplifting, joyful, celebratory, like excited about school, then if they start with that, we want them to finish with that too. And that full spectrum, that full experience.
Totally.
And that's what I had in so many ways. And not, you know, going to Boston Tech in particular, you know, my high school years, they, you know, I always felt in school a sense of love and belonging and friendship. And not that there weren't difficult days, but when a school welcomes the child and when a school community welcomes the child, that just changed the trajectory, and it makes so much more possible for that young person.
Right.
And they get to learn and they succeed academically.
Yeah. Talking about comprehensive academic learning, there has been a strong narrative this past year with COVID about the importance of emotional learning and support. In your plan, you named the need to provide comprehensive academic and social emotional support. What does providing social emotional learning and support look like in your plan? What are some tangible ways you can see comprehensive social emotional support implement in BPS? And how will your plan include staff and faculty?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's core to what our kids need and the adults that are in the building that can provide those support services. So over my time on the council, I advocated for a full-time nurse in every one of our school buildings, because too many of our schools were sharing a nurse. And a kid doesn't decide what time of day or what day of the week they get sick. And, you know, when we think about bumps and bruises, that's fine. Like we can deal with it, or a bellyache, whatever the case might be. But I also know that our nurses, our school nurses, are the ones that are often the first to see a child who maybe has mental health illness, who maybe is dealing with some food insecurity, who is maybe challenged with homelessness. All of those issues are often first they're first seen because a nurse has said, this kid's come into the nurse's office a couple of extra times this week. So it's so important that that nurse be there, because there's a lot of sort of triage that happens through the nurse's office. But then what? Then what do we do with our children who need additional supports? For me, the next leg of that now what is making sure that we have a full-time mental health professional in all of our school buildings. And we go back to, how do we get our kids to a place where they are able to engage fully in their academics? They're not well physically and emotionally and mentally. They're not going to be able to access that academic curriculum. So we need to make sure that we've got the mental health supports in place full-time in all of our schools. And too often when a kid is having a crisis, and it's a little bit of a separate conversation, but we often talk about the school to prison pipeline. And that will start with a kid who is a child in any one of our schools who is not receiving the services that they need. So they're unable to engage in that classroom experience. And then that creates a behavior issue. And then we're like, okay, well, now we're going to put this child into a sub-separate classroom because they're having a behavior issue, because we're not able to give them the things that they need so they can get engaged in the classroom. And then this child is inappropriately placed in a classroom that he or she, but in these cases, it's mostly he, doesn't belong in. And then when the kid has a crisis or an emotional breakdown, we then call 911. And then we wonder why we now have a student, a young person who's now having an interaction with the police. If the appropriate, strong supports are in place from the beginning, we avoid the crisis. We avoid the chaos. And then for those children who do need more significant or intensive therapies and care, can then access those, because we've solved these other problems that never should have been a problem to begin with. And then we can focus our energies, our skills, our highest quality and qualified individuals on serving the students who are most in need. And mental health professionals and providers in our school buildings also support our teachers, give our teachers the added supports they need to work with students, and offer them the skills that they need to do different things in their classroom, and do that in partnership for sure.
I think the overall theme I'm hearing is like creating an environment where the student, it's fun to learn, and also investing right now so we can potentially, like, it costs money, but if we invest now in the right way, we will save money in the long run.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's all that primary, it's like the primary care. We take care of it.
Yeah.
We keep people well. So we avoid, whatever the trauma or the drama is, we avoid it when we keep people well.
Yeah.
And then when someone who isn't well, when a student needs additional services, we have the capacity and the time and the ability and the people to do that work, so they can focus on that. We waste a lot of time with some of our professionals, especially our mental health professionals, our school psychologists, our school social workers, testing kids and evaluating kids as opposed to serving kids. And we're sort of upside down on that formula, and it doesn't do right by our kids. And when we put our kids, sorry, it's my dog chasing his ball. When we put our kids at the center of decision making, and when we think about our spending decisions, and we say for every dollar, how does this dollar spent positively impact our young people? We're going to make great spending decisions. We're going to make sure that our money is focused on where it needs to be focused, and that's on our kids, that's on our young people, that's in our students in our classrooms across the school district.
That is great to hear, especially me being a counselor in the schools. Sometimes I feel myself being stretched so thin between what's going on and trying to support families as well as students. So like, whatever we need to do to get additional support in, I'm willing to do. So that's great.
And we hope for, and through my education plan, we roll out some really ambitious goals. I want a full-time social worker, a full-time school psychologist, a full-time family liaison, and a homeless family coordinator, because we know we have students experiencing homelessness in every one of our schools across the district, all 125 schools. And we think, well, some schools are, have a student population that's more affluent than other. Every school has students experiencing homelessness, and we need to meet kids and by extension their families where they are. And for me as an educator, our schools are a community, and it is I think one of the most ideal places to meet our kids and to meet our families and provide them the services and the help that they need.
Yeah. Going into our next question, as supporters of vocational education and pathways for students, we were excited to see you prioritizing creating strategies that would strengthen and support Madison Park within your first 100 days in office. Our question is, why is strengthening and supporting Madison Park a priority for you? What impact would a stronger Madison Park have on BPS, students, families, and Boston overall? And what are the areas of Madison Park do you feel need strengthening? And what support do you see Madison, I guess, needing overall?
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to talk about Madison, and it's, there's so many answers to why Madison is a critical component to our city's future, especially for our kids and our young people first and foremost. So it goes back to, again, I was a student at Boston Technical High School. It's where I graduated from. I had access to a technical education. I took sheet metal. I took several years of drafting. I took electronics and computer science, and it rounded me out as a student. I contemplated entering, I thought about going to architecture school. I ended up not, but it exposed me to different opportunities. And it really, for me, rounded me out as a student. I ended up marrying an engineer who couldn't believe that I, who went to Boston Tech, could read floor plans and drawings. And not that I could read them in the same way that an engineer could, because I didn't have that specialized schooling. I could still understand floor plans and drawings, and that impressed him while we were dating. But I would, when I think about Madison Park and I think about the students at Madison Park, especially in comparison to almost all of the other Voc Tech schools in the state, which I've met with the directors of all the Voc Tech schools across the Commonwealth several times to talk specifically about Madison Park, and it's been on my plate since I joined the city council in 2016. It's been a big part of my work on the city council, making sure that we're both strengthening what's happening at Madison and looking for ways to further grow both the popularity of Madison, the reputation of Madison, and the partnerships that Madison really should have. And Madison's got some great programs there. They're a nationally recognized culinary arts program, and they've got some real success stories that have come out of Madison. I met my first student who had both received her associate's degree prior to receiving her high school diploma from Madison, and just was, so impressed with this particular student. But Madison gave her that opportunity. We need to make sure that more students have access to that opportunity, but that Madison's also doing more. There are too many empty seats. There are some lackluster programs that need some real rebooting. And then there are partnerships that we're missing. And we talk often about Madison and vocational technical education as a way to enter the construction field. But it also needs to be a pipeline to biotech. It needs to be a pipeline into healthcare. It needs to be a pipeline into technology or computer science. It needs to be a pipeline into finance. And it also still needs to be a possible pipeline into college. There is no, every career needs some sort of advanced education. And whether that happens in a traditional sense, right after high school and you go into like the old school 4 years of college, or you go into some sort of certificate program or advanced training, you need that. We can jumpstart that at Madison. And when I think about Boston's future and what I hope is a very robust economic the continued economic engine, not just of Massachusetts, but of the region, and if not the East Coast. Boston has that potential. The greatest barrier to realizing our full potential as a city and as the economic engine is our workforce. And we're going to continue to have to import talent from other places if we won't grow our own. And I believe that workforce of tomorrow should come right through Madison Park. And it's all of the trades, construction trades, but it's also in all of these innovative and growing industries. We look at, what's happened over this last year with COVID, and the vaccines came out of Massachusetts and Boston. We have the possibility of curing cancer here in the city of Boston because science is here. Our kids, our young people should be in those labs. Our young people should be helping formulate the answer to the cure to cancer. And those kids can be pre-trained through Madison Park, certainly in partnership with the industries. We need the industry's support and help to do this. But the city, and as mayor, I will put Madison Park first. It's why I've made 3 promises on the campaign trail, and one of them is Madison Park. I will also add, Madison Park should not close at the end of the school day. It needs to run, it needs to be a 16-hour facility. And we are retraining and upskilling adults in the after-school hours, or students from other schools who want to, whatever they want to participate in, they should be able to come to Madison after school hours and do that work there. We also need a new facility. We need new labs. We need new significant renovation, if not a full rebuild at Madison.
And with that, we are gonna go into our break. We'll be right back with our mayoral candidate, city councilor at large, Annissa Essaibi George. We'll be right back, guys.
Welcome back, everyone. We are back with mayoral candidate, city councilor at large, Annissa Essaibi George. City councilor, in your education plan, you stated that you will work with partners at the state level to reduce further privatization of our school, but instead increase funding for public education across the board. What do you see what do you see the impact of privatization of our school? What would you say to people who support privatization of school based on the argument of building more school choices for family and providing better quality school?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. Don't mind. That's Astro, my black lab, who is our COVID puppy. We got him over this last year, and he is generally a value add, but he's still a puppy. And so if he sees any of his friends go by, he gets very excited, but he's got this big So anyway, so, that's a great question. And we, often get talked, when we talk about privatization, we're often talking about charter schools and their role in our city. I don't support the growth of charter schools in our city for a couple of reasons, but the first and foremost is the financial impact it has on our school system across the board. I am a supporter of sort of the original intent and goal of the charter school movement, and that was to create an opportunity to study different concepts and ideas and educating our young people. And I do wish that we had better partnerships with our charter school partners, as well as our private school partners and our parochial school partners, because there are things happening in classrooms across our city that are best practices and should be shared and replicated as if they're the best thing for our kids. And again, any decision we make has to be student-centered. As mayor of Boston, I don't have any authority over our private schools, our parochial schools, our charter schools, and the charter schools in particular are all state mandated, that they're overseen by the state. So there's really no formal relationship other than they're educating our city's kids in them. I do think there's a very interesting thing that we need to take advantage of that the charter schools have truly mastered, and that's their ability to get some significant private investment, as well as taking advantage of some of the some opportunities for tax credits around rebuilding their facilities. Mayor Walsh, former Mayor Walsh now, a couple of years ago made a commitment for $1 billion build BPS plan, $1 billion to rebuild BPS and Boston Public Schools facilities. And $1 billion sounds like a great deal of money, but by my calculation and by most people's calculation, that is maybe a renovation or a rebuild, a combination of significant renovation and total rebuilds of only up to 10 schools. So $1 billion is only going to actually impact 10 schools in any which way. We have 125 school buildings in our city.
Yeah.
We've got, that's a lot more $1 billion than that we need. So we've got to think not every school needs significant renovation. Some are much newer than others, but we as a city need to think much more creatively and learn from our charter school counterparts and how they've been able to make that happen. There's some real opportunities for us, and we have to take advantage of it. We have to learn from others. There's no need to recreate the wheel. If that's something that we can copy, it's something that we can duplicate, then we should be doing that.
I like the fact that you said we need to learn from others and not create the wheel. Like and it's not like I'm against charter school. I understand the argument behind it, but like my high school was closed. But I see that a lot of schools are reopening, but they're not solving the issue at the core. It's just a new school with a new name, but the problem's still there. So I like the fact that, if we're looking like on a different lens and trying to figure out the problem and solve that problem, maybe we would not need to open new school and have school have a longer lifetime.
Yeah, no, and we, a number of years ago, probably in the very early 2000s, the late 1990, like 1999 to 2001, 2, and 3, maybe, we had received a little bit of money. And I say a little bit of money because it was a little bit of money from the Gates Foundation to reconfigure some of our larger comprehensive high schools. So High Park High went away and was broken into small schools. South Boston High School went away and was broken up into small schools. Dorchester High went away and was broken up into small schools. And for the most part, all of those small schools failed.
Yeah.
And we ended up failing so many of our kids through that experiment because someone came, if I can say this out loud, with chump change and got us to change the way that we did business, and our kids lost because of it. And it was actually, I ended up doing some work when I was in graduate school looking at this. We jumped through hoops for a little bit of money, and our kids lost in the end. And it became much more expensive to run those schools because we had multiple schools in one building. And I just had started teaching at East Boston High, and we fought it tooth and nail, and we weren't shut down. Charlestown High, the same thing. They weren't shut down, or they weren't, reconfigured into these smaller schools. Now, the reason why we started to look towards that was because we know that kids who are in smaller learning groups and cohorts and are allowed the opportunity to build relationship with their educators, with their teachers, with the adults in the building, thrive. And this goes back to the beginning of our conversation. When kids feel welcome, when they feel loved, when they feel acknowledged, that they feel that joy and that they have a place and they're able to build relationship, they thrive academically, right? So at Eastie, we said, listen, we're not breaking up into small schools. We are one school. We will be East Boston High School. But yes, we'll create some of these small learning communities. We'll be much more intentional around creating cohorts. So every group, these groups of students have the same group of teachers. So teachers can get together and do some case management. Who can get together? Because I have kids, and Jamari, you know this, Rudy, you know this. You have kids that you have a particular connection with that maybe your colleague teacher, it's a broken relationship. So we work, right? And I've had kids that I never had in my classroom that I had relationships with, that I built either because I coached them or I got to know them in the cafeteria, and they'd have a problem with the teacher next door, and I'd have to intercede, but that's because we were putting the kid first. And it's just so important to create those environments. And our kids, our families, our educators, our school teachers, our those that work in our buildings know what's best for our kids. And that when we take chump change to flip everything upside down, it's not good. It's not good. We have to have sustainable investment and make sure that it's about our kids when we make those decisions.
Definitely, 100%. So in our last podcast, we talked about the importance of representation and intentionality that comes with it. In BPS, 29% of students are African American and 42% are Latino and 9% are Asian, but there's not a staff that reflects that within BPS. Where does recruiting, hiring, and retaining educators of color fit into your plan?
Yeah, I know we've had a number of hearings about this on the city council through my committee and over these last 5.5 years that I've been on the council. That's about, so there's a couple of places that we need to fix the way that we do business to create a more diverse workforce, because our young people deserve a reflection in those that are teaching them. And it also is like a chicken and an egg. We want more of our young people to become teachers and educators. Right. And if they don't see a reflection of themselves in that field, they're gonna, look for something different. And so it's so important that we are recruiting our own. Mm-hmm. And so that we're pushing kids into these careers and exposing them, not just as I'm the teacher, you're in my classroom, you're now exposed to maybe becoming an educator. It's creating real programs to encourage our students to explore it for themselves. And it's also about looking to create opportunities around tuition reimbursement. There was actually a program.
Yes, I love that.
I love that.
Was it the STAR? There was a program where if Boston Public School kids went to any of our state schools that had teacher education programs, that they would get a significant discount on the tuition. But there's also, like, if you go to school to be a teacher, and especially if you're a teacher of color or a student of color, you come back and teach in our system. And there are some programs like this across America where we'll give you tuition for loan forgiveness and that sort of stuff. We just need to do a much better job as a city going into our teacher educator programs and recruiting out from them, especially around race, also around gender, because across our education system, it's a majority female industry. We need to, I'm a mother of 4 boys. We need more male role models in the classroom, especially at the lower grades. So the racial piece, the gender piece, certainly a reflection of ethnicity, and then the languages. The languages are so important because more and more our families in the city of Boston, English isn't their first language. It isn't the language spoken at home. So if we also value the relationship with family, we're going to make sure that we're creating opportunities to communicate with families. Most of our family liaisons that the Boston Public Schools are bringing on all speak a second language. Almost all of them, or many of them, I want to say almost all of them, because I think it may be almost all of them, speak a second language, and there's a certain fluency in that other language, and they're also more reflective of their school community, because we also know that the racial and ethnic demographics change neighborhood to neighborhood and school to school. So that's a really important piece. But that classroom teacher, really supporting the educators of tomorrow and getting them out of our own schools. Seniors that are graduating today or this, in the next 6 weeks, I want them to explore an opportunity to come back and be educators. The pay, especially in Boston, is pretty good, right? And there should be opportunities for growth. The other piece I want to say is we need to make sure that we've got support systems in place to support teachers of color, but to support all of our teachers, because the burnout rate is high.
Yeah.
So we've got to create those opportunities. But the other thing I see, I want to hesitate to say this publicly, but I think I've said this publicly before. We get really great classroom teachers, and I've seen this in particular with male teachers of color, right? They are fabulous classroom teachers. And we say, wow, that's a great teacher. Let's pluck him from the classroom and give him an administrative role.
Yeah.
He stops doing. He stops interacting with kids.
Yeah.
He stops being the person he is in the classroom. We do have to think about how we can celebrate a great teacher in the classroom, maybe help them with some additional professional responsibilities. But if they are shining in the classroom, why are we pulling them out? Why are
Yeah.
we pulling them out?
Yeah.
And then we hide them in an office.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard some case where teachers of color were shining in the classroom, but they weren't given the chance to advance because that's where they were good at and they wanted to keep them that way. But they also wanted to advance professionally,
Yeah.
and there was no program to help them within the school they were at to do that. So they felt like they were stuck.
Yeah, no, and that's the other end too. But
Yeah.
I think that sometimes you say, "Oh, that's a really, we want to help," but I think that there is an opportunity in that case to do a little bit of both. Because as a former classroom teacher,
Yeah.
once you step into an administrative role, I've been out of the classroom now 7 years. Or no, wait, let's see, how many? It's been a long time, 6 years, 6.5 years almost. I've never now taught in a pandemic, and it's been a number of years since I've been in the classroom. Administrators, they step out of the classroom, you become distant from it pretty quickly. So creating opportunities for administrators to still play a role in the classroom is maybe an answer or a fix to that problem. So we're doing both. We're giving additional responsibility and allowing for professional growth, hopefully adding a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
And so we're doing two things.
Yeah.
And then also making sure that we have school leaders that, represent the community at large, have certain cultural competencies. And my favorite thing, and we are really good at this at East Boston High School, is we encourage graduates of the high school who do go into education to come back and teach in our building.
Yeah.
And, they say that about Latin School has one of the highest ratio of alumni teaching. But Eastie, I think, may have topped them out, but that's something that we've got to be celebrating and promoting and encouraging across the board, and, embracing our own and creating opportunities for kids to come back, young people to come back and teach in the schools that they attended.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. Just a quick story, like one of the students that I had last year, she was a senior and she didn't know what she wanted to do, but she was just like, "Mr. Jones, like your job is like really cool. What do you need to do to be a guidance counselor?" And like we went over, what she needed to do and like what classes she needed to take and what majors she needed. And it was just so encouraging to hear, because she was just like, "Well, you're like me and like we're from the same community and like I can do it too." So like if I was in a different role, like administrative, like I don't think I would be able to affect change in that way. But just what you're saying struck me, because I feel like it's so important for us to have those connections. Me as like African American, being a guidance counselor, and like someone from Fenway, Mr. Rhodes, my guidance counselor from Fenway, he also encouraged like me to be a counselor. Just he didn't directly tell me, but he was just so cool. And I was just like, I want to be that for my students. And so I didn't know it at the time, but look at me now. And now when I go visit him, he's like, "Yeah, guidance counselor." So it's just full circle. So
I love it.
cool.
I love it. Over the course of my campaigns over the years and now running for mayor, I've had former teachers tune into some of my town halls. I've, and I caught my political bug when I was in high school. I had I'm not a confrontation. I was a energized high school activist, student activist, and I had a confrontation with Mayor Flynn just about budgeting and the school system. And I remember declaring, I'm like, because of this, someday I'm going to run for office. And the extension of that story is I also said that to my dad, and my father said, "An Arab girl with an Arab name, you're not going to win anything in this city." So I wanted to do the work. I felt very passionate about the work, but I also wanted to prove my father wrong. But it's so important to embrace our kids and include them in things. And so my teachers, this is where I was going with that story. My teachers, my former teachers and my former principal have come to different events for me, which I absolutely love. I love that they continue to believe in me. I'm a grown woman with my own children, and they continue to believe in me. And I try to do that for my former students. I've had a couple of Zooms with my former students, asking them about like their experiences since they graduated. What is it that they want from their next mayor? Because now I want to serve them in a different capacity. And on my social media, on Facebook, some of my former students will chime in and they'll be like, I'm voting for you because you're my former teacher. I had one young woman introduced me, one of my former students introduced me at my education town hall. And I was her classroom teacher, I was her softball coach, I was the senior advisor. She ended up being prom queen, and and now she's teaching back at Eastie. And it's just like this. It's so beautiful to continue to see our kids, our students continue to grow. And, I think that relationship needs to continue. And if you live in the neighborhood, if you live in the communities, if you live in the city and you remain engaged, those relationships can last for lifetimes. And that's good stuff. That's really good stuff.
Talking about bringing your experience and also the connection you have with your students and your campaign. You are, like we said it before, you're a former teacher, but you're also a businesswoman, and you've taught economics and business classes. So do you see any value in implementing more diverse classes like economics and financial literacy?
Financial literacy is a must. We have to do the foundation, right? We have to teach the reading, the writing. Literacy is so important. Math, science. And as our kids, when they have that strong foundation, when they enjoy school and they really get into their school experience as a whole, we also owe an opportunity to these kids to learn about the world around them, to do the current events, to do the ethnic studies, but to also do the financial literacy. I'd love every kid to do the financial literacy. I'd love every child to be CPR certified before they graduate from high school. I used to do it in my classroom. And for our kids, the kids that we teach, that we work with, city kids, they are always hitting one obstacle, another challenge, another like hard road here. But when you give them that CPR card, well, they've got I've done this. I go, yes, you've done this. You now have the training and the tools to potentially save a life. That's pretty powerful. And I love doing that with my students. I want them CPR certified. I also want kids to learn how to swim before they graduate high school. We're a harbor city with water, with pools, with beaches. Kids need to learn how to swim, and we've got to create. And when we think about long lifetime fitness, when we think about, and then when you have your own children, I think it's just such an important skill. And we've got pools. We've got pools in some of our schools. We've got pools in our community centers. We've got pools in our community organizations. So, and then the financial literacy piece, I did, when I was teaching economics, I also taught the entrepreneurship class. I actually built my business using the curriculum that I was teaching in my classroom. And I think putting it to real practice was important. And then I bring my students for a tour, and I'd be like, this is you can build a business. And especially for our immigrant students, this owning your own, really, and really for all of our students. But I think I internalized some of that as I'm a daughter of immigrants, that's what you want to do. You want to own your own, you want to build your own, you want to create something special for you and for your family. And that's certainly around building a business. But the financial literacy piece can open the door to own your first home. And when we talk about the wealth gap here in the city of Boston, the difference is when we talk about the $8 for the Black family and the $250,000 for the white family, that difference is your home. It's that asset. It's that ownership piece. And financial literacy is, it's a tool that no one can ever take away from you. When you understand it. And so when we were doing, there was actually some state curriculum that I was using in my class, because I taught a lot of the electives. I could sort of ebb and flow the way I wanted to. But there was some great curriculum that the state had designed around financial literacy. And just like how to balance a checkbook, how to, when we got to the credit card situation, one of my students is like, well, as long as I always pay off the minimum. I'm like, And the other piece, so that was really important to me. And that was during, the height of everybody was getting a credit card offer in the mail. We've got some, it's a little bit more difficult these days, but not really. But what I also found was the workbook that we used, kids were bringing it home and sharing that information with their families. And as much as parents are a child's first teacher, the more tools, the more equipment, the more things we can give our kids, they can then teach their family, their siblings, their, and look for options to create wealth for their own family. But you got to learn how to balance a checkbook. You got to learn how to create some savings, and that there helps you look for ways to generate wealth for your family.
Very often when so I work with high school student and college student, and when they come back, they're like, how come y'all didn't talk about money? How come like we didn't learn how to do our taxes? Like, it's like they're struggling in that piece. And I was like, we need to do more in including those stuff in the classroom, because post-secondary journey, it's not only college, it's life. And you have to teach them how to deal with life.
And that's like when I think about Eastie's mission statement, but when I think about the Boston Public Schools mission statement, it is about creating, building people, building young people so that they are college, career, and life ready. Like it's giving them skills they need to live a full life. And, I think through the college application process, another exercise my students used to do is, I mostly taught juniors and seniors. So we had this one project we would do, which I'd say, okay, pick, 3 careers that you might be interested in, 3 jobs that you think you might want to do. And let's go look at the labor market. Let's go look at the average salary. Let's go look at where you might be able to make more money if you had an interest in that field but let's look about the long-term likelihood of that job being available for you by the time you graduate from college. Right? Let's see, like, how long is that job going to be even possible, right? And now we look at COVID and we see how some jobs have just been totally eliminated because of the economic conditions. So you have to, and then let's talk about how much it's going to cost to go to college. Like, okay, so you want to go to a private school, but you don't know what you want to do yet. Well, maybe you should decide what you want to do. So you pick the right school, so you pick the right job on the other end. And if you want to if you're going to school to be a nurse, there's going to be work for you on the other end. So if you have to take some debt, that's a worthwhile investment. But if you're not really sure what you might want to do, then community college, state school, those are all much better options, because like I have one of my boys says to me, because we talk a lot about school and college in our household, I want to be part of the conversation, part of their option, their opportunity for them. And one of my kids says to me, he goes, Mama, I'm going to community college. I said, oh yeah. I said, why? He goes, because I don't know what I want to do. And it's going to save you some money. I want to be the kid that saves you some money. Good, I like that.
I love them
like
already.
that. But until you know what you might want to do, don't take on the debt. Don't take on the debt. And we know that to our kids. That's part of the skills that we give them.
I mean, like, the part of the debt is like, our kids, they don't think about the future. They think about the now, and they want to get out now. But like, I feel like over the last few years, I've seen a shift where students are more willing to listen and understanding, because people are talking about the debt.
Right.
Like, you think about when you go to college, you take on the debt, and you see some of your friends who didn't go to college, went to the trade, and they're already starting their life. They're buying their house. You're like, what's going on? When am I going to be there? So it's definitely like more conversation, more curriculum around financial literacy, and making sure we're truly building our student for college, career, and life at high school.
Yeah. Because you can go on to college for 4 years and come out not prepared for life. And that's a bigger problem.
That's a bigger problem. Yeah.
So for our last question, in your plan, you name that you would create a partially appointed governance structure for the Boston School Committee. We are curious to know if you see any benefits to a fully elected Boston School Committee.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that I believe in a fully appointed school committee. I went to high school during my years of high school where I was a student activist. It was a fully elected school committee. I think that too often the politics really seep in, and it does already in Boston. You know, the Boston educational system is oozing politics.
Yeah.
And an elected school committee, I do feel that that will be like politics on steroids when we think about BPS. For me, the model that I support and am a proponent of is a fully appointed school committee that is done in partnership with the Boston City Council. We're both, you know, the mayor, me as mayor, I'm elected, the city council is elected. And we just did this a few years ago with the Community Preservation Committee, where it's a 9-member body, 5 appointed by the mayor and covering specific interests. For the school committee, those interests would be the student. I'm working right now for the student member to have the right to vote on the school committee, which the student doesn't now, but I want a student member, I want a parent member, I'd love an educator member. That there's some trickiness to that because an educator is also an employee of the school district, but we should also have a college interest on the, like a college member, university member. We should have an employee member, right? Because they have an interest in the success of our school system. You know, there should be, you know, that sort of interest on the school committee helping make decisions for our kids. And then 4 by the city council, which would be at-large members, so members of community, members of, you know, whatever it is, sort of at-large citywide, just regular people who want to inform the work of the Boston School Committee, and certainly the superintendent is there too. But I want, as mayor, to be held accountable for the success or failure of our school district. And I think it's really important to have one person to point to that's doing this work. We have over every election, mayor's election, candidates, I'm the education candidate. No, I'm the education candidate. No, I'm going to be the mayor, the education mayor for the city of Boston. We have never elected a former classroom teacher, 13 years of experience in the classroom, BPS graduate myself, BPS parent. I want to lead this city and I want to play the leading role when it comes to our schools. And I want that responsibility to land at my feet. And I believe a teacher can turn around what's happening in our Boston public schools. And we have 125 school buildings. We've got fantastic things happening in all of our schools. But what we need is all of our kids to access that excellence across the board. And not all of our students can access that excellence. And that is critically important for the next mayor to ensure that that is able to happen. And the only way to ensure that the mayor makes it happen is by giving the responsibility to that mayor. And I want to be that mayor.
So you said, so if it's partially appointed and
It's 100% appointed.
100% appointed, but
Yep. It's just done in partnership with the
in
city.
partnership with the city councilors, would you then add more seat on the council? Because it used to be 13, they went down to 7.
Yeah, I think that and that's flexible to me, whether it's 9 members, 7 members, 11 members, that actually doesn't matter to me. It's about having the right voices at the table to represent those that have an interest in the success of our schools. Certainly our kids, certainly our parents, certainly our teachers, our educators. But for sure, there is a particular interest that our business community has in the success of our schools. There's certainly an interest that our colleges and universities have in the success of our schools. There's also an interest when we think about our nonprofit communities, our community-based organizations. They want our schools to be successful. And then I also want to be able to do this in partnership with the city council. I'm a city council member today. I've been on this body 5.5 years. I'd like to have a say in who's on the school committee today.
Right.
And I think it would be disingenuous I don't know if that's a right word. I think it would be disingenuous for me to say, well, as mayor, I want all that power. No, I think that should be shared power. But in the end, the responsibility lies with the mayor on the success of the Boston Public Schools. Certainly, you're also working with a superintendent. I want a superintendent that I will allow to lead the schools. But in the end, when there's a problem, I want to wear it. When there's success, I want to celebrate it. And that's really important to me. Again, as a parent, as a former teacher, as you know, as a graduate, I want that responsibility.
Right.
I also think the nomination process should be much more transparent. So I didn't say that before.
So
Yeah,
also,
right now it's a really difficult process to navigate. There's some great people on the nominating committee, but that needs to be a much more transparent process. We did that with the Community Preservation Committee for those 4 open seats, because the other seats are sort of dedicated to special interest. The 4 open seats, applications were done online and available, but we took from the 100 or so applications. I happen to be on that nominating committee. From the 100 or so applications, we selected 16 who we thought were the best 16 candidates for public interview. Then we selected 4 of the 16 for the 4 seats and had a public hearing in which they testified. The city council members could ask questions. The public could offer testimony, all done in the public view. And to me, that's really important to do that as well. And that has to be part of the process.
Yeah.
thank you for saying that, because one of the issue that we have is that we don't feel that the school committee is a correct representation of Boston,
Right.
because most of the member, if not all, are exam school. If they went to BPS, they exam school, and I don't think having a committee who's only have alumni of the exam school is a correct representation of Boston Public School.
Yeah, no, I have to think about who's on the school committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2, I think 2 members are exam school affiliated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for us. That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us on City Council at Large. Annissa Essaibi George, who's running for mayor. Where can people find you?
I love that question, because I hope they can find me in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
At large city councilor, I try to be ever present, but I do know sometimes, especially now during COVID, it's not as easy to find me. But you can email me at Annissa, ANNISSA, at AnnissaForBoston.com, or you can go to our website, AnnissaForBoston.com. You can also send me a text message. My cell is 617-594-1841. I am also, I want to be present. I want you to reach out. I want you to share your thoughts, your ideas. Obviously, anyone listening, I'd love your support and your vote in this run for mayor, but be in touch. If you've got questions, if you've got comments, if you want to inform some of the policies that we're pulling together. On our website, we've slowly started to roll out some of our policy initiatives, but they're dynamic draft policies. You can inform them. They are forever changing. And I think it's really important to note that because it's on paper doesn't mean that it's a done deal. I want you to continue to inform the work. I've got certain core values, certain core goals, important goals and priorities in my work as mayor, but I want others to inform this work. It's, again, I want to serve you as mayor of this great city, and I look forward to it. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Jamari, for welcoming me today.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you
And we'll be right back for a final thought.
Welcome back, everybody. As you know, we just finished talking to Annissa Essaibi George, a mayoral candidate. What an amazing conversation we had. I'm very excited to hear more from her and the direction in which she's going to be going in. I really enjoyed when she was talking about just her views on BPS and how to make that better. And especially with adding more educators of color to BPS and retaining them. Because that, for me, working in BPS, that's one of the things that I care a lot about, amongst other things. But I really feel passionate about, retaining, hiring more educators of color to teach our kids. So yeah, that is really, really awesome to hear. You know what I mean? What you think?
Yeah, great conversation, And we thank her for coming on the show.
Mhm.
Um, I like her like how she's pushing Madison, because Madison doesn't get the respect they deserve.
Yeah.
So this is the second candidate, well, not mayoral candidate, but a second official we
Mhm.
talked to who have stated how vital Madison Park is to the future of Boston in terms of education.
Yeah.
Um, well, she stated that she's for when we talk about the elected the Boston school committee being elected then appointed. She's
Yeah.
for a partially
Mhm.
appointed elected school official, where she will, if the mayor and the city council will
Mhm.
have a say and not just the mayor. That is something new. So
It's like kind of open to it, but
open to it, but
yeah.
I'm still feeling the hesitance on why not giving the people the power. And
Mhm.
it's politics. But
Understandable.
I'm thinking about it. Um, and I need to think about it some more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, great conversation. But
Mhm.
here's one thing I was thinking, and I forgot to answer that question. She was making some great points on like funding the right funding right now and
Mhm.
making sure our the school environment, everything, the BPS get everything they need. But who's gonna benefit um from those investments? Because we forget that gentrification is happening
Mhm.
and people of color are moving to the suburb or out of
Suburbs.
Boston.
Yeah.
My fear is that this is gonna happen, and then we not gonna. So
We don't benefit.
are we gonna benefit for what we're
Yeah.
fighting for?
Yeah.
Like, are we gonna benefit? So yeah. So it's not. It's so interesting because everything is connected.
Yeah.
Like you find in one battle, then you're like, oh shoot, this is connected. Like if we do this now, who's gonna benefit from it?
Right.
We have to like cover all points.
Mhm.
That's why it is important for us to get involved. It is important to once the if there's debates, forums happening, we need to get involved. We
Yeah.
need to listen, and we need to make sure that we create change, but change for us.
Yeah.
For us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's those are all excellent points, man. I think we have to come back to the point for us is, why are we doing this? Why are we talking to these candidates? One is to raise awareness about, the election that's coming up. And then two, you should know what these candidates stand for and just not check off a box because you know the name, but
Mhm.
really, is this candidate for your interest?
Yeah.
Do they deserve your vote? Um, and so our one of our missions is to raise awareness and help people be more involved in their community.
Okay.
And so I think I'm really, really enjoying talking to these candidates. Never in like years would I think we would be like doing this. And I'm just excited, man. I am definitely excited. We got some more stuff coming up. Let us know what you think about the interview, or anything that Annissa talked about. Did anything surprise you? Was it shocking? What do you think about the different topics that we touched on? And what questions would you ask her? Put it in the chat. I mean, in the comments. Let us know.
Yeah. And let us know who do you want us to talk to next.
Yes.
You know, mayoral candidate, we're here. Like, come talk to
Yeah.
us. That's
We're
how
making
this
it
thing is
happen.
taken, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, that's it for us today. Let's get out of here. Straight out of BPS.
Podcast.